Hey everyone, it's Tobes, and welcome to your second monitor. Today is the next video in my series of Commander Legends Battle for Baldur's Gate deck techs. I'm covering every legendary creature and background from Baldur's Gate in no particular order, so let's get to it. As you see, today our commander is Gale, Waterdeep Prodigy, paired with the Scion of Halaster background. Gale comes from the city of Waterdeep, where his talents with the Weave of Magic allowed him to join the renowned Blackstaff Academy. His skills grew as he was mentored by the wizard Elminster, and he eventually became chosen of Mystra, the goddess of magic herself. When her interest in him later began to wane, he sought to reunite with her a missing part of the weave contained within a Netherese tome. Unfortunately, the power within it leapt into Gale when he opened the tome and instilled in him a dark, insatiable hunger, forcing him to consume sources of magic lest it explode disastrously. This gnawing, dangerous hunger remains with him still as the game's story begins, and it's something fun for us to deal with. Video games. I'm excited to show you what I put together for Gale, but before we get started, let's go over my deck building template. I like to build my decks around my commander. I want to show off why it's such a cool card and why I thought it deserved a deck of its own. So I take about 30 cards and put them toward doing whatever my commander asks of me. This is our game plan. It's what we do at the table and how we try to win. 30 more cards go towards supporting that game plan in the form of card advantage, acceleration, and interaction pieces. I usually run 1 or 2 sweepers, sometimes more if it would play into the game plan, sometimes none at all, and I almost always keep to a floor of 38 lands. That way I can always hit my land drops and cast my spells and, play commander. So let's talk about our commander and their background. Gale, Waterdeep Prodigy is a 1/3 legendary human wizard for 2 and a blue that says whenever we cast an instant or sorcery spell from our hand, we may cast one target card of the other type from our graveyard. So if we cast an instant from our hand, we can cast a sorcery from our graveyard, even at instant speed, or vice versa. And if a spell cast from our graveyard this way would be put into our graveyard, exile it instead, so we essentially get to flash it back. We also have choose a background, and the background we've chosen is Scion of Halaster. 1 and a black for a legendary background that says commander creatures you own have, the first time you would draw a card each turn, instead look at the top 2 cards of your library, put one of them into the graveyard and the other back on top of your library, then draw a card. So, what we have here today is a deck meant to represent Gale's bottomless craving for magic. That means we are spellslinging, one of my pet strategies in Commander. It has a reputation for interminable turns, so I try to play quickly and with foresight so as not to make my opponents wait too long, but unfortunately that's not the only drawback to Spellslinger decks. The biggest is that they don't lend themselves to an obvious win condition. Sure, we might take a lot more game actions than our fellow players, but if those actions don't move us closer to ending the game one way or another, all we're doing is postponing the inevitable. And don't get me wrong, this can still be a lot of fun for us. It just takes a particular mentality to choose a deck knowing that we're as likely to enjoy playing it as we are to eventually lose with it. So we want to run a lot of spells, but of course, the more instants and sorceries you run, the fewer slots you have in your deck for permanents that reward you for casting those spells. That means the usual approach is either to build toward a combo kill, whether it's a few cards working together or some kind of storm-style payoff, or to run huge, powerful sorceries that can impact the board or our opponent's life totals on their own. There are plenty of versions of Gale decks that work both of these ways, and this isn't one of them. Instead, I wanted us to walk more of a middle path, based on the curse of the Netherese orb Gale is suffering. After all, he enters the story looking for a solution to his condition, and hoping to find it in the party of playable characters. So why can't we build around that? The core of our deck is more than 30 spells, split pretty evenly between instants and sorceries, that we can use with Gale. We protect ourselves by sniping our opponent's creatures and keeping our hand and graveyard full as we dig through our deck. What we're looking for is one of our permanents that rewards us for casting all these spells, mostly giving us token creatures we can use to stabilize at the table and then turn into a fleet of attackers. A 1/1 bird or a 2/2 drake isn't that impressive, but a dozen of them attacking into a line of defenders we've hit with a bunch of removal can do a lot more than it seems. Gale is looking for answers to his problem, just like we're looking for ways to turn our fast and furious spellcasting into a threat for our opponents, so it seems like we can work together on it. Of course, we have to have cards in our graveyard to take advantage of Gale's triggered ability. Our background helps us with that, turning our first draw on each of our turns into a graveyard-friendly sleight of hand, or technically a nagging thoughts. That works on our first draw on our opponent's turns too, but it's not the only way we have to get cards in our yard. We have plenty of self-mill and surveil and cycling and selection effects to fill our bin and give Gale more snacks. because that's the goal of the deck, to feed him as much magic as we're able, helping him to find the friends who will assist in his recovery and our victory in the process. Gale's arcane hunger might seem endless, but the game doesn't have to be, so if defeating our opponents is the only way for him to find satiety, so be it. We put our entire crew of colorful characters toward the roles they need to play, directing them where they need to go, letting our token producers keep our field covered with extras, and giving Gale the support he needs to make it to the next meal. With all this moving magic, he'll surely be satisfied with our Spellcraft services. You'll enjoy this deck if you like the idea of managing multiple pools of resources, pulling from both your hand and your graveyard, and being rewarded for creatively sequencing them both, or if you like the feeling of racing toward a goal with time running out, all while maintaining an outwardly jovial and easygoing facade as the clock ticks closer and closer to zero. So as usual, this Moxfield list we're going over today is linked in the video's description. At the bottom of it, you will find a considering section absolutely stuffed full of cards that I considered putting in the deck, but ultimately which didn't make the cut for me. However, if you have a bigger budget, or a smaller one, if you like what I've done and you want to go harder into it, like there are a lot of spells in that considering section you can be putting in this deck, or if you're interested in what I've done and you just want to use it for inspiration, that considering section is a great place to begin when you build your own Gale, Waterdeep, Prodigy, and Scion of Halaster deck. So, we're going to begin with our graveyard section. These are all cards that have ways of putting cards in our graveyard. We can hit some of our opponents with them too, but it's really just ways to give us cards that we can flash back with Gale once we cast a card of the opposite type. So instants will let us flash back a sorcery, sorceries will let us flash back an instant, and of course, if we're casting an instant at instant speed, we're casting that sorcery as part of the resolution of this ability, so we can do that at times we wouldn't normally be able to cast a sorcery, including during our opponent's turns. Something fun to do, but we've got to get those cards into the graveyard first, so these are our cards that let us do that. We start with Careful Study, a single blue for a sorcery that lets us draw 2 cards and then discard 2 cards. If this seems familiar, this is the blue Faithless Looting. We don't see it as often as we see Faithless Looting these days, but it's pretty good for us. It gives us card selection, even though it is drawing us cards and we are not ending up hand positive at the end. In decks that care about the graveyard, I still consider this a draw effect, since we are putting cards in our graveyard we can use in other ways, and those other cards we've drawn, and we're going to be able to use from our hand, hopefully. There we go. Next we have Consider, a classic. As of, I guess, Midnight Hunt. So this is a single blue for an instant that lets us surveil 1 and then draw a card. I've used the avatar printing because it's funny, but yeah, surveilling lets us put a card from the top of our library into our graveyard if we want, and so that can put things in our graveyard. This is also a great instant for us to use to be able to flash back a sorcery, since this is only a single blue that lets us surveil and draw a card, and of course, that's after we've gotten that sorcery flashed back from our graveyard thanks to Gale. Nice. Next is Exhibition Tidecaller. This is a, obviously, non-instant or sorcery. This is a creature from Secrets of Strixhaven, an 0/2 for a single blue. It's a Djinn wizard that has an Opus trigger. Whenever we cast an instant or sorcery spell, target player mills 3 cards, and if 5 or more mana was spent to cast that spell, that player mills 10 cards instead. Usually, we're targeting ourselves with this. Now, we can target someone else if it looks like they're, stacking the top of their library with something powerful, or who knows, maybe someone casts Doomsday and can't immediately win, and we're able to use our Tidecaller's trigger by casting an instant and just mill them out. That's not really what we're going for, though. We're not trying to win with mill. We want to fill up our graveyard. So being able to put 3 cards, or sometimes 10 cards in our graveyard, can really be helpful to us. Next we have Thought Scour, a great one for us. Single blue for an instant, target player mills 2, and we draw a card. Awesome. It is worth noting, though, that our background, Scion of Halaster, replaces the first draw that we have on each turn, which means if we draw a card on our opponent's turn, Scion of Halaster will replace that draw with our not quite sleight of hand effect, because sleight of hand puts the card that we don't choose on the bottom of our library, so technically we're casting that other spell that I mentioned, good grief. But yeah, if we were to cast this on our opponent's turn with Scion of Halaster in play, and of course Gale in play, since Scion of Halaster only gives that ability to Gale, then if we target whomever we target with Thought Scour, that player, including us, is going to mill 2 cards, and then instead of drawing a card, we will do the Scion of Halaster thing. We'll look at the top 2, put one in our graveyard, put the other back on top, and then draw. So it's worth noting that that background works on our opponent's turn. Next we have Bitter Triumph. Obviously you don't have to run the Mystical Archive printing, but I think it's gorgeous, so I do. This is 1 and a black for an instant that destroys a creature or planeswalker, but has an additional cost of us discarding a card or paying 3 life. So we can pay the 3 life, that's fine, and then we have an instant speed Hero's Downfall that costs a single black less than Hero's Downfall. But we have it in this section because we can discard a card with it. It lets us put a specific card we might want to flash back into our graveyard. What's especially nice about this is an additional cost, which means when we cast Bitter Triumph, we are putting a card in our graveyard as part of casting it. If that card is a sorcery, casting Bitter Triumph is going to trigger Gale and let us flash that sorcery back, since we have to target that sorcery when Gale's trigger goes on the stack, but Gale's trigger can't go on the stack before Bitter Triumph has gone on the stack, and in order for it to go on the stack, we have to have discarded the card. So we're able to, let's say we have Bitter Triumph and some sorcery in our hand, we can discard that sorcery as part of the cost of Bitter Triumph, get our Gale trigger, and immediately cast that sorcery with Gale before Bitter Triumph even resolves. Neat. Next we have Chart a Course. 1 and a blue for a sorcery, draw 2, and then discard 1 unless you attacked this turn. So we have several different ways to attack in this deck and actually do some damage. It is more of a late game thing for us than early game, but we can do it. And if that's the case, then it's a sorcery speed 2 mana draw 2. But what we want is to be able to draw 2 and then discard a card. So Chart a Course is even better for us if we haven't attacked, because that lets us put the card in our graveyard so that we can flash it back later. Of course, we can use it both ways, but it works for us in either of those ways, and it's a nice card for us to be able to flash back as well, since it's only 2 mana. Great. Next we have Curate. Curate is originally from the original Strixhaven set, yeah, but I'm running the Brothers War printing because it actually keywords Surveil. And also it looks like it might be M&M working in the Brothers War. Who can tell? Anyway, this is 1 and a blue for an instant that lets us Surveil 2 and then draw a card. This is just Consider, but it costs an extra generic and it lets us Surveil 1 more, and that's pretty good. Next is Dreamscape Artist, a really cool one from TSR. This is 1 and a blue for a 1/1 human spell shaper that lets us pay 2 and a blue, tap it, and discard a card, and sack a land. So a lot going on here. And if we do that, we get to search our library for up to 2 basic lands and put them on the battlefield, untapped, and shuffle. So this is a cool deal. The lands go into play untapped, so we're sort of getting a refund on 2 of the mana we've spent. We are having to sack 1 land to do it, but we could have tapped that land prior in the turn, even just to pay this cost. So we might be sacrificing a land we've already gotten mana out of to get 2 lands that we can get mana out of now. So yeah, pretty okay on that. And it lets us discard a card. So we're not just putting a land in our graveyard, which we don't care about that much in this deck by sacrificing it, but we're also discarding a card and turning that card essentially into a Harrow. We're losing a land, but we're getting 2 other lands. Those lands are coming in untapped. So yeah, Dreamscape Artist is a great way for us to turn the cards in our hand and the lands we have in play into additional lands. So this is a solid ramp piece for us. Next up, we have another nice ramp piece. It's Millikan. Millikan is 2 generic mana for an 0/1 artifact creature construct that if we tap it and mill a card, we get to add a colorless mana to our pool. Great. We want to be able to get that colorless mana. We want to be able to put cards in our graveyard. Millikan helps us do both. It's a 2 mana untapped rock that lets us do that, even though it is a creature. Next, we have Ransack the Lab. This is 1 and a black for a sorcery that says look at the top 3 cards of your library, put 1 in your hand and the rest into your graveyard. So this kind of does what Scion of Halaster does for us, but instead of looking at the top 2, 1 into hand and 1 into graveyard, it's the top 3. Pretty good. And I know Scion of Halaster doesn't actually put 1 in our hand, it puts it back on the top and then has us draw it, which counts for drawing cards. But yeah, this is a similar effect. 1 in our hand, the others in the graveyard. Pretty good way to draw cards and be all set up. And what's especially nice about Ransack the Lab is that it is just strategic planning, but in black. Again, 1 in a blue, sorcery, look at the top 3, 1 in your hand, the rest in your graveyard. Strategic planning is older than Ransack the Lab, but we've got it in both of our colors, so we might as well have both effects. Next, from Streets of New Capenna is Tainted Indulgence. a blue and a black for an instant that lets us draw 2 and then discard a card unless there are 5 or more mana values among cards in our graveyard. This happens sometimes. Sometimes we're able to get those mana values because we haven't flashed back a bunch of our spells. Maybe we've even got, from milling or discarding or sacrificing it, a land in our graveyard, so that's mana value 0. So this can be a 2 mana instant speed draw 2, but oftentimes it's just draw 2 and discard 1, which is just what Chart a Course is for us sometimes, so yeah, pretty okay. It's just this is an instant speed. Next we have Frantic Search. 2 and a blue for an instant that lets us draw 2 and discard 2, and then untap up to 3 lands. So if we spent mana from lands to cast Frantic Search, we get all that mana right back. Great. So this is just Careful Study at instant speed for free. As long as we can front the 3 mana, we get them all right back. And what's nice about this is if we've used that mana on other spells, or if we, let's say, have been in a situation where maybe we tapped 2 lands and a mana rock to cast something else, and then we've played a land, we might tap that land and float the mana as part of Frantic Search and untap some lands. Anyway, this Frantic Search and these kind of untap that many lands effects, there's some fun trickery you can do with it, and so might as well. In addition, this is Careful Study at instant speed, so it's something that we can do on our opponent's turn in order to flash back some sorceries. And once we've done that, since Frantic Search will resolve after the sorcery we flash back, we're going to end up with at least 3 mana, so we can cast more spells, maybe on our next opponent's turn, if we've got another instant in hand and sorcery in our graveyard. Pretty good. Next we have Fact or Fiction, classic one. 3 and a blue for an instant that says reveal the top 5 cards of your library. An opponent will separate those cards into 2 piles, and one goes in your hand and the other in your graveyard. So this is us taking 5 cards and getting access to all of them. Maybe it is lands going in our graveyard or some of our mana rocks, and that's not ideal. We don't have a lot of ways to get those back. But everything that goes in our hand, we have access to, and everything that is an instant or sorcery, of which most of our spells in our deck are, is going in our graveyard, and we can definitely use those there. Plus, we've got 2 great characters, Joyra and Slimefoot, working on this together. Love it. Next we have Hostile Negotiations, another one from the Brothers' War. 3 and a black for an instant that says exile the top 3 cards of your library in a face-down pile, then the next 3 cards of your library in another face-down pile. We get to look at each pile, turn one of them face up, and our opponent gets to either choose the face-up pile or the face-down pile to go into our hand. The other one will go in our graveyard, and then we lose 3 life. So this is like Fact or Fiction, but instead of our opponent being able to see all the cards, and us too, we get to see all the cards, and there's 1 extra card. Both piles are 3 cards, and our opponent has to choose which pile we get, with one of those piles being face down to them. So they're choosing blind on that. So it may be that, the face-up pile that we choose is 3 lands, and they've got to either choose to deny us those lands or deny us whatever's in the face-down pile. Meaning we're either set for our land drops over the next 3 turns, and maybe we have spells in our graveyard we can use, or we're not going to get to use those lands, but whatever was in the face-down pile, we might be able to cast that same turn. And since this is an instant speed thing, we can interrupt someone else's turn with this, maybe flash back a sorcery in the process. It could just be a lot of fun. Next up we have Pile On. This is a removal spell, 3 and a black for an instant with Convoke, meaning we can tap creatures to help cast the spell, and each creature produces mana of a color that it possesses. Like if we tap, Gale, we can produce a blue mana with it, or they can pay for, essentially, a single generic mana. So often what we're doing with Gale with Pile On. This is pretty great with our many token creation effects. And Pile On says destroy target creature or planeswalker and surveil 2. So not only are we getting another instant speed hero's downfall, but we also get a little surveil on top of it. Great. Next is Step Through. This is 3 and double blue for a sorcery that returns 2 target creatures to their owner's hands. So double unsummon at sorcery speed is fine for, 5 mana. I suppose it at least gets things out of the way. But we can also wizard cycle this for 2 generic, meaning we can pay 2 and discard it from our hand to search our library for a wizard, reveal it, put it in our hand, and shuffle. And we've got a few wizards in this deck beyond just Gale himself. which means we can get Step Through into our graveyard for 2 generic and turn it into a wizard. We can draw one of our payoff cards for 2 mana, put Step Through into the graveyard, and then it's ready for us to flash it back when we cast an instant with Gale in play. Great. Next up, we have Professor Onyx, one of our very best payoffs in the deck. 4 and double black for a 5 loyalty Liliana Planeswalker. Don't worry, she's incognito as Professor Onyx. She has a Magecraft ability. Whenever we cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, each opponent loses 2 life and we gain 2 life. That's each opponent, so pretty solid drain effect that if we're double spelling basically every turn, and oftentimes multiple turns on each turn cycle, or multiple times each turn cycle, this can be quite a bit of damage, especially late game if our opponents have been attacking each other or we've been attacking our opponents, and someone who's at 40 life losing 2 isn't as worried about it as someone at 14 life losing 2. And that's just before we even get to her loyalty abilities. If we +1 her, we lose a life, and we look at the top 3, 1 goes into our hand, and the rest into our graveyard. So that's Ransack the Lab, or Strategic Planning. Pretty good. We can -3 her, and each opponent sacrifices a creature with the greatest power among creatures they control. So we get rid of the most dangerous thing on each player's playmat. Seems good. Or if our opponents let us get Professor Onyx to 8 loyalty, then that's bad for them. We can -8 her, and everyone discards a card or loses 3 life, a total of 7 times. They do discard a card. If they don't, they lose 3, and then we repeat that 6 times. So if they've got 7 cards in hand, they can avoid losing life by discarding the entire hand. Otherwise, they're going to lose up to 21 life. Pretty good. Last in this section is Shadow of the Second Sun. This is a sweet, sweet card. 4 and double blue for an aura that enchants a player, and it says at the beginning of each enchanted player's post-combat main phases, there is an additional beginning phase after this phase. Meaning, if we enchant ourselves, which we will with this, it means we will get this trigger at the start of our post-combat main phase, and that means after basically our turn will look like this. We'll get our beginning phase, untap, upkeep, draw. We'll get our first main phase, our combat phase, our second main phase, and then instead of going to our end phase, we will get another beginning phase. We'll get to untap, upkeep, and draw again, and then we go to our end phase. So this is not just powerful because it lets us draw an additional card, but it also untaps all of our permanents. Every one of our creatures that we've tapped, because maybe we attacked, every one of our lands that we tapped. And if we have anything that triggers during our upkeep, Shadow of the Second Sun will get us an additional trigger for that. This is really a cool card that I don't get to put in as many decks as I would like to. It's just pretty neat for us, and it helps us sort of double our mana on our turns, or at least cast as many spells as we want on our turn without having to worry about holding up mana to cast instants and flash things back on our opponent's turns, since we're going to untap after our second main phase anyway. Plus we get to draw a card. Neat. And that covers our graveyard section. Yeah, let's move on to our Magecraft section. This is all cards that either have the actual Magecraft ability, like Professor Onyx, or otherwise trigger when we cast instants and sorcery spells. So for example, Exhibition Tidecaller is that Djinn Wizard that has an Opus trigger. An Opus trigger triggers whenever we cast an instant or sorcery, and it cares if we've spent 5 or more mana on it. But in either way, we've cast an instant or sorcery spell, we're going to do a lot of this in this deck, and we're going to get rewarded by milling some cards. Hopefully. We can hit someone else with it, but we're usually trying to hit ourselves. Next we have Cornered by Black Mages, a sorcery that's in this section because it makes a token that has a triggered ability. 1 and double black for a sorcery that has each opponent sacrifice a creature of their choice. They get to pick which one, but that's fine. And we make a 0/1 black wizard creature token with whenever you cast a non-creature spell, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. So a little bit of burn. It affects every non-creature spell, not just our instants and sorceries. This is what we call a black wizard token. It's from the Final Fantasy set, and so you get one of these little black wizard friends. Next we have Sedgemoor Witch, a beloved card from original Strixhaven that thankfully has dropped in price thanks to Secrets of Strixhaven recently coming out at time of recording. This is 2 and a black for a 3/2 human warlock with Menace and Ward pay 3 life. Remember, original Strixhaven is the set that introduced Ward. I think it did. I believe it did. Yes, it did. Yeah. And Sedgemoor Witch has a Magecraft trigger. Whenever we cast or copy an instant or sorcery, we make a 1/1 pest, a 1/1 black and green pest creature token that when it dies, we gain a life. Nice. The pests are not going to do a lot of combat damage, but they do stand in the way of attackers pretty well and gain us life when they die. Nice. Wingblade Disciple is next. This is 2 and a blue for a 2/2 human monk with flying and a flurry ability. Whenever we cast our second spell each turn, we make a 1/1 white bird creature token with flying. Since we're trying to double spell basically every turn, this is pretty likely to mean get a bird every turn. That's pretty good. Next we have Circle of Power. Similar to Cornered by Black Mages, this is a sorcery. This costs 3 and a black, and it lets us draw 2 cards and lose 2 life, and then make one of those black mage tokens. Lets us ping our opponents whenever we cast a non-creature spell. And Circle of Power gives wizards we control +1/+0 and lifelink until end of turn, which is pretty cool because it means if we cast this as our first spell, let's say, and then we make our black mage, and then we cast another non-creature spell that turn, well, that black mage is going to get +1/+0, which doesn't matter, but it is going to get lifelink, meaning we're going to, it will get those as part of casting Circle of Power. When we cast our second spell, I should say, that black mage is going to ping each opponent, and we will gain a life for each of those pings, since that token now has lifelink until end of turn. Pretty nice for us. Next up, we have another wizard from Final Fantasy. This is Hermes, Overseer of Elpis. I'm not a Final Fantasy guy, so I don't know who this gentleman is, but looks like they're doing cool stuff. This is an Elder Wizard for 3 and a blue, a 2/4, that says whenever we cast a non-creature spell, we make a 1/1 blue bird creature token with flying and vigilance. So a little bit of an upgraded bird over our Wingblade Disciple, as these have vigilance. And Hermes says whenever you attack with 1 or more birds, scry 2. So that counts the birds that Hermes himself makes, and the birds that our Wingblade Disciple will be making. So yeah, a scry is pretty great in a deck that cares about being able to manipulate the top of our library and is already doing that with our Scion of Halaster background. So being able to say like, oh, I don't want to have to waste my next Scion of Halaster effect on these 2 lands, I'll just put these on the bottom. Pretty good. Next we have Talrand, Sky Summoner. 2 and double blue for a 2/2 legendary Merfolk wizard that says whenever we cast an instant or sorcery, we make a 2/2 blue drake creature token with flying. So even better flyers for any time we're casting the many spells that we're casting in this deck. Next we have Dika, Fractal Theorist. We're up to 5 mana value. This is 4 and a blue for a 3/3 legendary human wizard with Magecraft. When we cast or copy an instant or sorcery, we make a 0/0 green and blue fractal creature token with a number of 1/1 counters on it equal to that spell's mana value. So we get a variably sized spell, or rather creature, that does not fly, but we get it every turn. And if we want to, we can pay 3 and a blue, and we can make one of our creature tokens unblockable. Not usually something we're doing in this deck. We really want to go more wide with these tokens, since we've got a volume of spells we're casting, but it can be useful sometimes just to keep a token alive, since it can't be blocked and thereby killed in combat with combat damage, or just to sneak in the last couple of points of damage we need to take out an opponent or a planeswalker. Next up, we have a fun one. It's Docent of Perfection. This is 3 and double blue for a 5/4 insect horror with flying that says whenever we cast an instant or sorcery, we make a 1/1 blue human wizard creature token, and then if we control 3 or more wizards, we transform this creature. This is very easy to do because we get this once, we have a wizard. We get it a second time. Remember, Gale is a wizard too, so it counts Gale as a wizard, obviously. It's not just counting these tokens. And when we transform the Docent, it becomes the final iteration, because this is the most upgraded form of Delver of Secrets. Final Iteration is a 6/5 flying Eldrazi insect that gives all of our wizards +2/+1, that includes Gale, and flying, still includes Gale, and has the same trigger whenever we cast an instant or sorcery, we make a 1/1 blue human wizard creature token, which is a 3/2 flying wizard with this ability, meaning they're all Delvers of Secrets. So this is really, or insectile aberrations if you wish, really cool in our deck. Getting a lot of wizards, like 2 extra wizards every turn, and having those wizards become 3/2 flyers is just really strong. And sort of Talrand, eat your heart out, but also don't become this thing because it's gross. Next up, we have a really cool one, Lord of the Nazgul. This is 3, a blue, and a black for a 4/3 legendary Wraith Noble with flying that gives all of our Wraiths protection from ring bearers. Sure, maybe relevant. This is a mechanic from the Lord of the Rings Tales of Middle-earth set, and we have the upcoming Hobbit set coming out, so might be relevant, even if it's not printed in the Hobbit. There might be some special guest cards that people are infusing into their Commander games from it. So yeah, not usually that relevant, but it's there. However, for 5 mana, we get a 4/3 flyer that says when we cast an instant or sorcery, we make a 3/3 black Wraith creature token with Menace. 3/3 Menace creature is pretty solid. And then if we control 9 or more Wraiths, which is not hard to do with the amount of sorceries and instants we're casting in this deck, Wraiths we control have base power and toughness 9/9 until end of turn. That means we have 9 creatures that are all 9/9s. The Lord of the Nazgul is one of them, so one of those 9/9s flies. The other ones all have Menace. So, does this kill someone? Does this kill everyone? It sure can, and it's not hard to do in this deck. Especially since if our opponents are like, oh wow, you're making a lot of 3/3s over there, but then they don't say what else happens with that. If all they think we're doing is making 3/3s, that seems threatening. But they may not remember that it can become deadly. So yeah, Lord of the Nazgul is pretty fun. Next up is Metallurgic Summonings. 3 and double blue for an enchantment that says when we cast an instant or sorcery, we make an XX colorless construct artifact creature token, where X is the spell's mana value. So this is sort of like Dika, but rather than getting fractals, we're getting artifact creatures. And if we pay 3 and double blue and exile Metallurgic Summonings, we can bounce, or rather return, all instants and sorcery cards from our graveyard to our hand, although only if we have 6 or more artifacts. This is not coming up that often in this deck. We don't always want to get cards out of our graveyard rather than just flash them back with our commander, but if we need to, then there are definitely times where it's like, well, we've got a lot of instants in our graveyard, but no sorceries in hand, or vice versa. We just want to be able to access those spells. We might be willing to get rid of our token-producing effect in order to get those spells back in hand and be able to cast them and trigger some of our other payoffs. Metallurgic Summonings can be pretty good for us that way. We've already seen Professor Onyx. She's got that Magecraft trigger that drains each opponent for 2 and lets us gain 2 life whenever we cast or copy an instant or sorcery. Next we have Shark Typhoon, which is like Metallurgic Summonings, but it's 1 more mana, 5 and a blue for an enchantment that says whenever you cast a non-creature spell, make an XX blue shark creature token with flying, where X is that spell's mana value. So these tokens are not artifacts, but they do fly and they are sharks, and that's cool. So Shark Typhoon is pretty sweet for us as a way to get some more value and more flying value, which we've already seen can be really good from creatures like Talrand or Hermes or our Wingblade Disciple, or, you know, just Docent of Perfection flipped over. Pretty good. Finally in this section we have Hullbreaker Horror, 5 and double blue for a 7/8 Kraken Horror that can't be countered and has flash, so we can sneak this in. That says whenever you cast a spell, any spell, choose up to 1. Return target spell you don't control to its owner's hand, or target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. So notably, we can't put our own spells back in our hand because it's a spell that we don't control, but we can put our own non-land permanents back in our hand if we want to recast them for some reason, or just to protect them. Maybe we have an instant in hand, and an opponent casts a kill spell on Gale. We cast an instant to draw some cards, Hullbreaker Horror triggers, and we can put Gale back in our hand, rather than having to put him back in the command zone and thereby recast it. So Hullbreaker Horror is solid for protection, but is really here as a removal effect, and protection in another way. We can have that spell that we didn't like go back to its owner's hand. They're going to be able to cast it again, but maybe not this turn, depending on how much mana they have left. This is something that can tempo our opponents down in a really powerful way. In addition, we can also just bounce their stuff. If they spend a turn casting an 8-drop, maybe we don't have an instant to respond to that with in order to trigger the Hullbreaker Horror and put that 8-drop back in their hand. But maybe next turn, or our next turn, we cast anything and we can just bounce that 8-drop, forcing them to recast it. So yeah, pretty sweet. And those are the 2 sections that make up the majority of our game plan. Oh, hey, did you just like the video? Nice, thanks so much. I'm just kidding, you don't have to like the video if you don't want to. I appreciate you being here either way. Thank you for joining me. So let's move on from our game plan to our support sections for our game plan. we're going to start with our card advantage section, which as usual, I have tagged as draw. It doesn't necessarily mean that all these cards do the draw a card action, or even that we get to keep those cards. But in this deck, because our graveyard is so important, selection can be card advantage too. Like Careful Study, lets us draw 2 and then discard 2. That's fine. Consider lets us surveil 1 and then draw 1. We are running Gitaxian Probe because it's so good in this deck, even though it is $3 USD at time of recording. And I would like to avoid cards like this if I can, just because of their effect, but it is very good for us. Because Gitaxian Probe costs a single blue Phyrexian mana, meaning we can cast it for a single blue, or simply by paying 2 life. So it's essentially a free spell in terms of mana if we want it to be. It is a sorcery that lets us look at target player's hand and then draw a card. The reason this is so good is because if we don't have any mana left after we cast an instant, but Gitaxian Probe is in our graveyard, we can still flash Git Probe back by just paying its cost with life rather than mana. This is Phyrexian mana, so we're able to do that just on its own. A really cool ability for us. In addition, being able to look at someone else's hand, sure, that's neat. We can get some value out of that. We can get some play for the person who looks like they're most threatening against us, and know what they have coming. Plus, it replaces itself in our hand when we draw that card, so yeah, pretty good. Next, we have Harmonized Trio. This is a sweet card. Now, I know you're looking at it and you're saying, we've got 16 sorceries and 16 instants in this deck. Technically, we have one more instant that works a little differently from the rest because Harmonized Trio is a prepare creature. This is a new type of card that we've seen in, again, the recent Secrets of Strixhaven set, which is sort of like it has an adventure. But instead of this prepare spell being an adventure, it's something that we can cast from exile or cast a copy of it from exile once our creature is prepared. The way this works is Harmonized Trio is a 1/1 Merfolk Bard Wizard for a single blue that says tap and tap 2 untapped creatures you control. So that means total of 3 creatures, the Bard itself and the other 2, because it is a trio, you see. And then this creature becomes prepared. While it's prepared, we can cast a copy of its prepare spell, and when we do, that unprepares it. But it does mean we can prepare it multiple times. We prepare it once, we cast our prepare spell, and then we prepare it again the next turn. Since Gale is not usually in this deck to attack, and because we're making quite a few tokens in this deck, as you've seen already, Harmonized Trio plus Gale plus any token gives us access to Brainstorm. A single blue for an instant that lets us draw 3, then put 2 cards from our hand on top of our library in any order. Meaning we're up 1 card, since Brainstorm didn't cost us a card, since this is a copy of it that we're casting. But we are able to do cool, fun tricks with Brainstorm. Now, to reference the loading ready run meme, you can brainstorm wrong. You can set yourself up in a bad way with Brainstorm. But it is a very powerful draw effect that can protect you from hand attack by you hiding some cards, quote unquote, on top of your library. It can be a way for you to tuck some cards that are in your hand that you don't need right now back on top and rather get some other ones. Because remember, it doesn't say draw 3 and put 2 of those 3 back on top. It can be 2 that were already in your hand. But at the very least, you are getting an extra card that you can cast this turn, and that's pretty solid. It's especially nice because Harmonized Trio gives us access to Brainstorm, which is just good on its own, but also Brainstorm is instant speed, which means if we have Harmonized Trio prepared, and we don't have any spells in our graveyard except for some sorceries, we can always Brainstorm on an opponent's turn, or on our turn if we wanted instant speed, and flashback a sorcery from our graveyard that way. So this is one extra spell we have access to, which is pretty nice, which is not included in the instance and sorcery count on our Moxfield page. Cool. Next we have a classic. It's Ponder. 1 blue mana for a sorcery, look at the top 3, put them back in any order. You may shuffle if you don't like those 3, and then draw a card. So we're either drawing something random, or one of those top 3 on our library, and we know what the other 2 that are coming back are going to be. Yeah, just a powerful draw effect for us. Also, orbs. I know they're moons. Portent is next. This is a blue and for a sorcery that says look at the top 3 of target player's library, put them back in any order. You may have that player shuffle, and then draw a card at the beginning of the next turn's upkeep. If this sounds like Ponder, it is. The difference is we don't draw the card right away, and we don't have to target ourselves with it. So this is worse Ponder in several ways, but still a pretty solid Ponder for us, and a nice sorcery for us to be able to flash back for value, or to cast in order to trigger Gale's ability to flash back an instant for us. And since it's only a single blue mana to cast, we can flash back an instant that's a little more expensive and get its value on top of Portent. Neat. Next, we've seen Thought Scour, draws us a card after having a player mill 2 cards. It's usually going to be us. Chart of Course lets us draw 2 cards, and then we discard a card unless we attack this turn. Curate lets us surveil 2 and then draw. Into the Royal is more of a removal spell, but it has a kicker that lets us draw 1 and a blue for an instant with kicker 1 and a blue. To return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand, and if it was kicked, draw a card. So this can protect one of our creatures, this can bounce one of our opponent's permanents, this can protect one of our permanents or bounce an opponent's permanent. And either way, if we're casting this with kicker, we get to draw a card. And since we're getting to cast it from our graveyard with Gale, we can pay the kicker cost and get it even when we're bringing it back after having cast a sorcery. Neat. Next we have Mind Stone. Also, not so much of a card advantage effect, but it has the option for it. 2 generic for an artifact that taps for a colorless mana, so it's a mana rock for us. Or we can pay 1, tap, and sack it to draw a card. Meaning, this is a card that is great for us to be able to cash in late game if we just don't need any more mana and we're desperate for card draw, or if we're desperate for card draw early on, it gives us the option to essentially draw a card for 3. 2 plus the 1 and tap and sack. Usually we're not doing that because it's so valuable to us as a mana rock, but in case we need it, having the option for that is pretty solid, so yeah, nice. Next up is Ransack the Lab. It is just strategic planning, but in black, so both of them are a great way to put 1 card in hand and 2 in the graveyard. Next we have See the Truth, which is so cool in our deck. This is 1 and a blue for a sorcery that says look at the top 3, put 1 in your hand, and the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. So sort of that more traditional anticipate effect, I suppose. However, if it was cast from anywhere other than our hand, we put each of those cards in our hand instead. So that means when we cast this from our hand, we look at the top 3, 1 goes in our hand and the others go on the bottom. If we cast this from our graveyard, we look at the top 3 and they all go in our hand. So this is 4 mana for us to cast it twice, since we're casting it from our hand, and then from our graveyard flashed back with Gale, for a total of 4 cards. And that first card we draw is from the top 3, and we get to choose it, so we get selection on top of that as well. See the Truth is very cool. Next up, we've seen Strategic Planning, Tainted Indulgence, we've already seen as well, and Frantic Search. They both let us draw a card and discard cards. Frantic Search lets us untap cards as well. Next, we have Tevil's Judgment, a card that is a sweet payoff card in our deck. 2 and a black for an enchantment that says whenever 1 or more cards leave your graveyard, which is to say whenever we flash a card back with Gale, then we get to choose one of these that hasn't been chosen this turn. We draw a card, we make a treasure, or we make a 2/2 black zombie creature token. So this is a little bit of an expensive card in our deck, but it's one of the kind of cards that can go in a number of different decks. I try to make my more expensive cards that go into my decks either incredible in that deck or something you can put in other decks if you were to want to. Tevil's Judgment is kind of both, but it's more that second category. If we need to draw a card, gives us access to that. If we need a little mana, treasure token. If we need tokens of our own, of creature style, we got a zombie druid. Great. Next, we have Circle of Power. Draws us 2, has us lose 2, and makes a black wizard, a black mage token. Gives all of our wizards +1/+0 and lifelink until end of turn. Fact or Fiction will put some cards in our hand, whichever one of those piles we choose. Hostile Negotiations, we get to put into our hand whichever pile our opponent chooses, and then the other one will go in our graveyard, much like with Fact or Fiction, which can help us too. Next we have From the Catacombs, 3 and double black for a sorcery that puts a creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under our control with a corpse counter on it, and if that creature would leave the battlefield, exile it instead of putting it anywhere else. So this effect is not linked to the corpse counter. The corpse counter doesn't have an inherent mechanical meaning. It's not like a finality counter. It just reminds you about this effect. Even if you get rid of the corpse counter, that creature's still going to go to exile rather than anywhere else if it would leave the battlefield, just so you know. But the reason this is in this section is because we can cast this spell on a creature in a graveyard. We can steal creatures from our opponent's graveyards with From the Catacombs. 5-mana spell that steals us the best creature in any graveyard is pretty cool. Also, we can use it to bring back our own creatures. And I know you're looking at this line that I haven't said yet. Just give me a second. We'll get to it in a moment. From the Catacombs also has Escape for 3, double black, and exile 5 other cards from your graveyard. Meaning we can cast this card as many times as we want from our graveyard, as long as we have 5 other cards in our graveyard to exile when we cast it for 3 and a black. We can keep casting it over and over and over. It's sort of its own variant of flashback, so that we can do some pretty cool things with this. If we do flash this back, quote unquote, with Gale, it will go to exile and we won't be able to keep casting it. But if it does go to our graveyard, we can escape it if we've got a bunch of cards in our graveyard we don't want to flashback, or, maybe are not instants of sorceries we could flashback. So yeah, From the Catacombs is pretty cool. However, it also says, as part of its resolution, we take the initiative. What in the world is the initiative? Well, we're running a Baldur's Gate deck. So I go over this in most of my videos for the Baldur's Gate Commanders. This is the initiative. The initiative is sort of like the monarchy. It is a status that a player has, and a player can get the initiative in one of 2 ways. Either you play a card that says you take the initiative, or you do combat damage to someone who has the initiative, and then you take the initiative from them. Whenever one or more creatures a player controls deal combat damage to someone with the initiative, that player will take the initiative, or it could just be taken by someone playing another permanent that says you take the initiative. But what does the initiative actually give you? Well, when you take it, whether it's because you've played a permanent that says you take the initiative, whether you've done combat damage to a player that has the initiative, or whether it's in either of those cases, or at the beginning of your upkeep, if you just kept the initiative until then, what happens is you venture into the Undercity. What in the world does that mean? This is the Undercity. This is a dungeon card. What it means is you put a little marker on the first room, the secret entrance, and you get to do the thing that it says, which is just Lay of the Land. Search your library for a basic land, reveal it, put it in your hand, and shuffle. So you get to, quote-unquote, draw a basic land. That's why From the Catacombs is really in the draw section, because you're drawing a land at the very least from first venturing into the Undercity. Then, again, whenever you take the initiative, or at the start of your upkeep if you have the initiative, you will continue to venture, meaning you get to go to another room in the dungeon. You always have to go to the next room down from the room you're in. You can choose sometimes, like if you're in the forge, you can choose to go to the trap or the arena, but you can't go laterally and you can't go backwards. So you just find your way through the dungeon somehow, you get the benefit of each room you get into, and once you've completed the last room, the Throne of the Dead 3, next time you would venture into the Undercity, you go back to the secret entrance and start over. So yeah, you get free additional value every turn that you take the initiative, or at your upkeep when you have the initiative already, which can be pretty nice with the Second Sun card we saw a little bit ago that gives us an additional beginning phase. So if we have the initiative, either we've taken it that turn or we started our turn with it, we get to venture into the Undercity when we take the initiative or at our upkeep, and then we go to our second main phase, get that trigger, and then move to our second beginning phase, and we get an additional dose of venturing during that additional upkeep. So that's pretty sweet. So that is what the initiative is. It seems complicated, but it ends up being pretty fun to play through, especially since it causes players to attack each other in order to take the initiative and get all those values from the Undercity. So it makes the game go a little faster. Pretty nice. Let's go back to the section we were in. We just saw From the Catacombs, which is pretty fun. We've got Step Through. Step Through can draw us a wizard because it can be wizard cycled for 2 generic. That's cool. Inspiring Refrain is maybe my favorite sorcery in the deck. I just love this card from Original Commander 2021. That was the original Strixhaven Commander precons. This was from the Prismari precon, which was my favorite, or rather my first precon when I came back to Magic after a very long break. And I just love it. It's a great Spellslinger deck, and it's a really cool card design. So Inspiring Refrain is 4 and double blue for a sorcery that lets you draw 2 cards, and then you exile Inspiring Refrain with 3 time counters on it. That's relevant because it has Suspend 3 for 2 and a blue, meaning instead of casting it for 4 and double blue, we could cast it for 2 and a blue, but we're not casting it, we're suspending it, meaning it goes to exile with 3 time counters on it. And then at the start of our upkeep, we remove a time counter, and when we remove the last one, we can cast it for free. Which is great for that Second Sun card I mentioned a moment ago, because this gives us a second upkeep during our turns, and it lets us power through Inspiring Refrain. However, what's especially cool about this card is that it automatically resuspends itself. So this is a little bit weird in our deck, because if we cast it, it doesn't go to the graveyard on resolution, it goes to exile, suspended, with time counters on it. So we're not going to be able to flash it back with Gale, unless it gets to the graveyard another way. And we have a lot of cards, especially our second commander, Scion of Halaster, that puts cards in our graveyard directly from our library, or we have other ways to put it, to discard it, or otherwise get it into our graveyard without having cast it. So Inspiring Refrain is really cool, because if we have it in our graveyard, and we cast an instant, and then, admittedly, we've got to spend 6 mana to flash this back with Gale. If we do, when we flash it back, it doesn't go to exile because, or rather, it doesn't go to exile permanently. It goes to exile with 3 time counters on it, thanks to its resolution. So we're going to get to cast it again in 3 turns, or faster if we have more ways of having upkeeps. What's coolest about that is it'll cast itself from exile, and then that's us casting a sorcery. We don't have to spend mana on it because that's how suspend works. So that will trigger Gale, giving us the ability to cast an instant right away, still during our upkeep, before Inspiring Refrain resolves that turn. And then we cast Inspiring Refrain, it re-exiles itself, we go into our draw step and draw another card, so now we've drawn 3 cards that turn, in addition to whatever else we might have gotten from flashing back an instant. And that's the start of our turn, that turn. And this happens every 3 turns. So Inspiring Refrain, 6 mana to start off with, but very, very strong for us. Finally, here's Shadow of the Second Sun, there we go. We've seen Professor Onyx, gives us the ability to lose a life, look at the top 3, 1 in our hand, 2 in our graveyard. Shark Typhoon can be cycled itself, something I didn't mention before actually, which lets us pay X1 in a blue and discard it to draw a card, so we can use this to draw a card. And X can be 0, so we can just pay 1 in a blue and cycle this, which is fine. But when we cycle it, we make an XX blue shark creature token with flying, the same kind of creature token that it makes up here. It's just that its power and toughness are based on the extra amount of mana we put into it when we cycle it, rather than, these triggered abilities. So we can use this as an instant speed way of getting a flying blocker by just holding it up and cycling it. Pretty neat. But the card we haven't seen in this section, I guess Shadow of the Second Sun, gives us a second beginning phase, which includes our draw step, so we'll draw a card off of that. We haven't seen Season of Weaving. This is one of our 2 Wraths in the deck. This is 4 and double blue for a sorcery that gives us 5 paw prints worth of modes. This is a little resource we can use by spending it on these modes, and we can choose the same mode more than once. We can draw a card for a single paw, meaning we could cast Season of Weaving and just draw 5 cards. That's okay. We can also pay 2 and choose an artifact or creature we control and make a token that's a copy of it. Pretty alright, unless what we're making a copy of is legendary, and then we'd have to legend rule one of them away. Or maybe not, because if we choose the 3-paw mode, then we return each non-land, non-token permanent to its owner's hand. Really good for a deck that cares about making tokens, as ours does, and bounces everything else that isn't a land off the battlefield, hopefully giving us a chance to then swing in to at least one person's board where they don't have any creature tokens with all of our creature tokens. What's especially nice about this is when a spell is resolving, nothing else happens until it's done resolving. So if we choose to bounce everything and draw 2 cards, that's cool. If we choose to draw 3 cards and make a copy, that's cool. But if we choose to make a copy of something and then bounce everything, the thing that we've made a copy of will get bounced, but the copy it will not. And because state-based actions like the legend rule are only checked when anyone would receive priority, not in the middle of resolution of a spell or ability, Season of Weaving lets us choose to make a copy of Gale and then bounce all the non-land non-tokens, meaning we will make a copy of Gale, bounce the original Gale, and only then does the legend rule get checked. And at that point, the original Gale isn't on our battlefield anymore, on our playmat anymore. He's now in our hand, which means we get to keep the copy, and we'll lose it if we replay our commander, but we can just hang on to our commander if we need to. Or if we're desperate for something to discard to Careful Study, let's say, we could discard Gale from our hand, and then he hits the graveyard and we can put him back in the command zone if we wanted to. It's just an option for us. It's just a neat trick that Season of Weaving can do here if we happen to have a legendary creature that we want to make a copy of and bounce the original. Yeah. So that covers our card advantage section. Let's go now to our ramp section. As usual, or rather our acceleration section that I've usually tagged as ramp. So Soul Ring is an obvious one. A single generic mana for an artifact that taps for 2 colorless. It is the symbol of the format. It is extremely powerful. We've got a nice, pretty Secrets of Strixhaven printing of it. So yeah, put this in your decks. Wayfarer's Bauble is next, a great card for any non-green deck, and some green decks, I suppose. It's a single generic for an artifact that if we pay 2, tap, and sack it, we get to Rampant Growth. Search for a basic, put it on the battlefield tapped, and shuffle. So even though this costs 1 more mana than Rampant Growth itself, which is a 2-mana spell, this costs 1 and then 2 more to activate. If we have this out on turn 1, then we're only spending 2 mana on turn 2, which is what you do with Rampant Growth anyway, generally. So this can be really great for us in terms of finding our mana, giving ourselves a little bit of acceleration, maybe fixing our mana if we're missing, a swamp. Yeah, pretty helpful for us. Next is Arcane Signet, 2 generic for an artifact that taps for 1 mana of any color in our commander's color identity. So in this deck, blue or black. It is a 2 mana untapped mana rock that makes both of our colors perfect. This is everything we need. Curious Homunculus is next. This is a weirdo. 1 and a blue for a 1/1 Homunculus that taps for a colorless that we can only spend to cast instant and sorcery spells. That's okay, we got a lot of those. So a little bit of a restrictive mana dork. But at the beginning of our upkeep, if we have 3 or more instants and or sorcery spells in our graveyard, we can transform it into the Voracious Reader, a 3/4 Eldrazi Homunculus with Prowess. Prowess is so good in our deck that also discounts all of our instants and sorceries by 1 generic mana. This includes the ones we cast from our graveyard. So I don't typically like to run discount effects in my decks unless there are at least 40 cards that can be hit by it. However, Voracious Reader is a little bit of an exception because it starts off as a mana dork and eventually becomes a pretty solid creature by us doing what we were going to do anyway. So for 2 mana, we get a mana dork that eventually becomes a 3/4 Prowess that also gives us this discount. It's sort of a gift with purchase. Next up, we have Dimir Signet. It's another 2 mana rock for us, 2 generic for an artifact that we have to pay a mana into, but when we tap it, it makes 2 mana, a blue and a black. So it fixes our mana. It's great for us. Yeah, we like this. We've seen the Dreamscape Artist. It does require a little bit of hoop jumping, but it does go find us 2 basics and put them on the battlefield untapped. Pretty good. Milliken taps for mana and also mills us, helps us. Mindstone taps for mana. Talisman of Dominance, we have not yet seen. This is another 2 mana rock. For an artifact, taps for colorless, or it taps for a blue or a black if we're willing to let it do a damage to us. Which, as I often like to say, we always are. The way to think of this is a Mind Stone that we can't crack because it's a 2 mana rock that taps for colorless. And if we don't need colored mana, we just tap it for colorless. But if we need colored mana, what does it mean to need that mana? It means that the difference between casting a spell or not is tapping Talisman of Dominance and taking a damage from it. So the question becomes, would you take a damage to cast an extra spell you wouldn't have otherwise been able to cast? I would every time. If you do that 5 times over the course of the game, sure, you're down 5 life, but you're up 5 spells. And that's so much more powerful than just having 5 extra life. Of course, it is a risk. It could kill you in the end. But you were closer to victory than you would have otherwise been, even when you died, so it's worth it. And again, if you don't need the colored mana, just tap it for colorless and you're set. Next we have Bender's Waterskin. When the Avatar The Last Airbender set came out at the end of last year, I thought this was going to go in so many decks as just a sweet manolith that has an upside, which most manoliths these days do. A manolith is a 3 mana artifact that taps for 1 mana of any color. This one also says untap this artifact during each other player's untap step. So essentially this means we can make a mana with this on every player's turn. And it can be any color we need. Again, I thought this was going to go in most decks. It doesn't, unfortunately. But any deck that wants mana on an opponent's turn, like our deck, which has a lot of instants, and we want to be able to use our mana to either cast those instants, or for us to cast instants and use our mana to cast sorceries we're flashing back on that turn, Binder's Waterskin pretty much helps us every turn. So it sort of becomes this is the first thing you tap when you cast something on your turn, because you know you'll have that mana available to you again on your opponent's turns. Yeah, wish it were in every deck, but turned out not to need to be. However, it is cool. We've seen Frantic Search. Doesn't really ramp us, but kind of refunds us for the mana, so it's in this section just so we remember that it does that. Tevil's Judgment can reward us with a treasure token whenever one or more of our cards leave our graveyard. And Shadow of the Second Sun lets us untap all of our permanents because it gives us another untap step after our second main phase. Cool. That covers our acceleration section. We do have other discounts in this section. I just want to cover all of them here. Curious Homunculus, like I mentioned, gives us that discount as the Voracious Reader. Not the kind of discount that I would normally like in a deck like this, since we're not running quite enough spells to justify it on its face, but it does a lot for us before then, and even once it's the Voracious Reader as a 3/4 prowess. We also have other spells or other effects in this section that also break my rule for having discount effects, but for specific reasons. First is As Foretold. This is 2 and a blue for an enchantment that says at the beginning of your upkeep, put a time counter on this enchantment. And once each turn, you may pay 0 mana, rather than pay the mana cost for a spell you cast with mana value X or less, where X is the number of time counters on this enchantment. This card is so strong. It does force us to put that time counter on it. We can't choose not to. But if we plan this out properly, we can cast As Foretold, and then on our next turn, we get our time counter during our upkeep, and we're going to be able to cast before our next turn, either from our hand or from our graveyard, any spell, instant, sorcery, or otherwise, with mana value 1, and we're going to be able to do it for free. The next turn cycle, As Foretold, will have 2 counters on it, and we'll be able to do it for one of our 2-drops. We have so many 2-drops in this deck, even if it's just our Curious Homunculus. Getting that out for free is pretty great. This is going to keep going up and up and up, and eventually we're not going to have any spells we're going to be able to use with it. But being able to cast, one of our 6-mana spells, like Inspiring Refrain with this, and doing it for free, and doing it on an opponent's turn when we're flashing it back, having cast an instant, and getting our Gale trigger, is pretty great. However, we also have a couple of cards in this deck, like Into the Royal, or our Hullbreaker Horror, which can bounce non-land permanents, which lets us put As Foretold back in our hand and resets its counters when we cast it again. So this can be a little awkward sometimes for us, and if you're looking for something to replace this with, there are plenty of good options. But I thought it was a cool option for us, so yeah, I went with it. Yeah, next up is Uthros Psionicist. This is 2 and a blue for a 2/4 Jellyfish Scientist from Edge of Eternities that says the second spell you cast each turn costs 2 generic less to cast. So this does not discount all of our spells, but it does discount by more than 1, which is the relevant part of keeping it in this deck. This is a good blocker, a 2/4. That also means that every time we cast something from our graveyard, we're paying 2 generic less for it if it had that generic cost, which often means on our opponent's turns, if we are casting an instant so that we can flash back a sorcery, that sorcery is going to cost 2 less. Obviously on our turn, when the types are reversed, we're casting a sorcery in order to get an instant back, it costs 2 less as well. If we were to use this with Into the Royal, then Into the Royal is going to cost 2 generic less if we've kicked it, which gives us a reason to kick it. That kind of thing. This can be very powerful for us, especially since it doesn't only affect our instants and sorceries. We could use this to, cast Gale. Maybe it's turn 4, we cast any spell that leaves us with 1 blue mana in our pool. We can then cast Gale for just a single blue. Or if we have to recast Gale because maybe he was killed and went back to the command zone, this pays for the commander tax for him once, as long as he is our second spell. Pretty good. Last in this section is a Baldur's Gate card, Font of Magic. 3 and a blue for an enchantment that gives all of our instants and sorceries a discount of 1 generic mana for each time we've cast a commander from the command zone this game. So this seems like it can only get better the more times we cast Gale. But the difference is Gale is not our only commander in this deck. Scion of Halaster is our other commander. So if we spend turn 2 casting Scion of Halaster, turn 3 casting Gale, and turn 4 casting Font of Magic. Font of Magic now says all of our instants and sorceries cost 2 less, since we've cast 1, 2 commanders from the command zone. Pretty great. That discount of 2 is really powerful, and it only gets better if this stays in play and one of our commanders doesn't and we have to recast them. Terrific. That covers our discount section. Let's go now to our interaction section, which as usual I've just tagged as removal. We're going to start with Rapid Hybridization. This is a single blue for an instant. Destroy target creature. It can't be regenerated. That creature's controller makes a 3/3 green frog lizard creature token. This seems like exactly the kind of thing that Gale would have to deal with when he was back at the Blackstaff Academy learning magic. So seems like a cool thing, and it's an instant speed single mana kill spell, which is a great way for us to trigger Gale and flashback some sorceries on an opponent's turn, or just to get rid of something that's dangerous to us. Next we have Bitter Triumph, which we've already seen, lets us kill a creature or planeswalker and hopefully put a card in our graveyard. Feed the Swarm is 1 and a black for a sorcery that destroys a creature or enchantment an opponent controls. This lets us kill enchantments, and we lose life equal to that permanent's mana value. Worth doing if we want to get rid of an enchantment and we're having to do so in black. We do have a few blue ways to deal with enchantments, like bouncing them, but if we need to destroy something, Feed the Swarm can do it, and it can hit creatures too. Next we have Fell. 1 and a black for a sorcery, destroy target creature. That's simple. This is just a unconditional Doomblade at sorcery speed. Solid. A good thing to flash back from our graveyard too. We've seen Into the Roil, bounces any non-land permanent so we can protect ourselves with it, or rather our stuff with it, reset our As Foretold with it, or just get rid of something an opponent has, at least for now. Power Word Kill, it's another Doomblade. It's a Adventures in the Forgotten Realms, so sort of themed one. An instant for 1 and a black that destroys a non-angel, non-demon, non-devil, non-dragon creature. So as long as we're not hitting an angel, demon, devil, or dragon, we can just kill it at instant speed. That's fine. We have not seen Runaway Together. 1 and a blue for an instant, choose 2 target creatures controlled by different players and return those creatures to their owner's hands. So this card is great because it's an instant speed 2 mana unsummon that gets rid of 2 creatures. And those could be creatures on our opponent's boards, or one of them could be our creature. We can use this as a way to protect one of our creatures and in the process bounce an opponent's thing. That seems pretty good. We've seen Cornered by Black Mages. It's an edict effect, makes an opponent sacrifice a creature of their choice, and we get a Black Mage token. Soul Shatter, even better, 2 and a black for an instant that causes each opponent to sacrifice a creature or planeswalker with the greatest mana value among creatures and planeswalkers they control. So kind of similar to what Professor Onyx does, but rather than greatest power, it's greatest mana value, and it can hit planeswalkers. So this is a great card that is if we have 3 opponents, a 3 for 1. Nice. And then we can flash it back later with Gale. We've seen Pile On, destroys a creature or planeswalker, and we can convoke it. Step Through, bounces 2 creatures to their owner's hands. Lovely. We can use that sort of like a Runaway Together because we can hit one of our own creatures with it. Curtain's Call is 5 and a black for an instant that destroys 2 target creatures, but has Undaunted, meaning it costs 1 generic less for each opponent. So if we have 3 opponents, this is just 2 and a black for destroy 2 target creatures. Now we do have to hit 2 specifically, so if one of them gets bounced or protected or something, like with a hexproof, then we no longer have 2 creatures that are legal targets, so the spell will fizzle. But an instant speed spell that gets cheaper when we have more opponents is pretty good for us. And we've seen Professor Onyx with her Edict effect and Hullbreaker Horror and its ability to bounce spells that we don't control or non-land permanents to their owner's hand. We have 2 Wraths in the deck. We're running Season of Weaving, as we've already seen. It bounces every non-land, non-token permanent. And we also have Aetherize, which is kind of a Wrath. It's also kind of a protective spell. It's 3 and a blue for an instant that returns all attacking creatures to their owner's hand. So if an opponent is getting to attack us, or maybe, if we want to be political about it, is attacking someone else, and we just don't want them to keep their creatures, we can bounce all those creatures for 3 and a blue. It's an instant, and we're going to do it on an opponent's turn, so it's a great way to flash back a sorcery with Gale on an opponent's turn. But it's also the case that if we have something like Aetherize, if we have this happen, this is a cool way of using it. Let's say opponent A attacks opponent B, and opponent A is gonna just run over them and destroy them. we can wait until after combat damage is over. We can wait till the end of combat step, or even in the combat damage step actually, but wait till the after combat damage step when the creatures that opponent A attacked with that survived damage are still considered attacking creatures. Before their second main phase, we can say, hey, you lost some creatures, but you devastated opponent B, good for you. Etherize, bounce all your creatures that you declared as attackers that survived, and they go back to that opponent's hand. And so we say, now opponent B probably has worse defenses because you attacked them and probably traded with a bunch of creatures. You have worse defenses because you lost a bunch of creatures and were bouncing all the other ones you didn't lose. And so we're set up to do some solid damage, either from ourselves or to let opponent B get opponent A on the crackback if they weren't going to be able to anyway with those creatures having been tapped to attack. Or at the very least, now opponent C can swing in and hit opponent A maybe as hard as they hit opponent B. Lots of fun stuff we can do with Etherize. And that covers our Wrath section. We're going to go now to the other supplemental categories in our deck, which we've mostly seen. We're going to start with our Payoff section. All we have in this section is Tevil's Judgment. It gives us a reward for what we were going to do anyway, which is having cards leave our graveyard. There are more cards tagged Payoffs in our Considering section at the bottom of the deck list on Moxfield, but most of the Payoffs in our deck are actually tagged as Magecraft cards. They are triggering when we're casting instants and sorceries, or when we're casting non-creature spells, or like with Hullbreaker Horror, just whenever we cast anything. So yeah, if you want to look for more Payoffs, especially things that trigger when stuff leaves our graveyard, the Considering section is a great place to find those things. Our next section is our Protection section. These are all cards that we can use to protect our creatures or ourselves in ways. Into the Royal can bounce a non-land permanent, could be one of ours. Same is true for Run Away Together for a creature, could be one of ours. Etherize protects us because maybe we're the ones getting attacked, so send all those attacking creatures back to their owner's hand. And Hullbreaker Horror, just like with Into the Royal and Run Away Together, can take care of one of our non-land permanents by bouncing it to our hand, as long as we can trigger it in response to whatever is about to get rid of it, like a Wrath or a removal spell or something along those lines. Yeah. Next up is our Drain section. These are all cards that directly hurt our opponent's life totals. Cornered by Black Mages and Circle of Power both make us a Black Mage token, which triggers whenever we cast a non-creature spell and does a damage to each opponent. That's solid. And Professor Onyx drains our opponents by 2 life, and we gain 2 life whenever we cast or copy an instant or sorcery with her Magecraft trigger. There we go. That's our Drain section. We have a little bit of Recursion in the form of From the Catacombs, letting us either steal an opponent's creature from their graveyard or bringing one of our own back, in addition to taking the initiative and sort of giving that creature finality in a way. And Metallurgic Summonings we can exile in order to get all of our instants and sorceries from our graveyard back to our hand, as long as we have at least 6 artifacts when we do. And then we wanted to take a look at our Tokens section. These are all the cards we have in the deck that can make tokens. Again, we've seen all of these. Cornered by Black Mages and Circle of Power both make those Black Mage tokens. Sedgemoor Witch has Magecraft, make a pest. Tevil's Judgment, something leaves our graveyard, we can make a zombie if we want. Wingblade Disciple makes us 1/1 birds when we cast our second spell each turn. Hermes makes us 1/1 flying vigilant birds when we cast a non-creature spell. Talrand, when we cast an instant or sorcery, gives us a 2/2 flying drake. Dika and Metallurgic Summonings make us non-flying creatures with a power and toughness equal to the mana value of a spell when we cast instants or sorceries. Dika also triggers when we copy them, and Dika makes us a 0/0 with counters versus Metallurgic Summonings, which makes us an XX. Shark Typhoon also makes us an XX, but it flies when we cast a non-creature spell. Docent of Perfection gives us 1/1 human wizards. That's cool, and can eventually make them flying and pumped up. Lord of the Nazgul gives us 3/3 Menace Wraith creatures, and can also make them pumped up, as long as we've got a lot of them. And Season of Weaving can make us a single token, or maybe 2 if we choose that middle mode twice. That is a copy of an artifact or creature we control. Neat. And that covers every token generator in our deck, as well as all of the spells in our deck. As usual, we're going to go over our land base now, starting with our basics. So of course we're running these Commander Legends Battle for Baldur's Gate basics. They've got awesome flavor text on them. I really love reading the flavor text of my basics whenever I get a new one out, and I like to run basics that have different flavor text if I can get access to those, which I've got a lot of these cards, so yeah. And this is a pretty good mix right here. I wouldn't mind going 9-8, even though this is closer to the actual balance of spells in our deck, just because you want to make sure you've got a black source untapped by turn 2, so you can cast Scion of Halaster turn 2 if that's what would be best for you. So yeah, 17 lands in our basics is pretty good. We have Fetid Pools. This is a bicycle land, meaning this is an island and a swamp on a tap land, so inherently it taps for blue or black. So it comes in tapped, counts toward our count of islands and swamps, and we can cycle it if we want to. Much like with the Mind Stone, this is something we would do either late game when we just don't need more mana, or we can do it early game if we're just desperate for card draw, which is not a bad thing to do with Fetid Pools, even in the mid game, because if we cycle this on an opponent's turn, we're going to not just draw a card. If we have Scion of Halaster in play, and Gale in play, of course, we're going to get to do the Scion of Halaster thing. Look at the top 2, put one in our graveyard and one in our hand, because it just says draw a card, and that would be the first card we drew on that turn. Pretty sweet. So yeah, a nice tap land with basic types, which is helpful to us. If you were to want to upgrade the Fetid Pools, I would suggest Watery Grave, the shock land. Costs a lot more money in terms of the monetary value, but it can come in untapped, and it's also a typed duel. But why do we care about typed duels? Well, because we have a check land. This is Drowned Catacomb. It's a land that taps for blue or black, and it comes in tapped unless we control an island or a swamp. Meaning, any of these 17 basics, but also Fetid Pools, because it is itself an island or a swamp. So we have a bicycle land and a tango land in this deck, which means we've got 19 lands that can have Drowned Catacomb come in untapped. And it being an untapped duel is pretty sweet. So yeah, if you were to want to upgrade this, Shipwreck Marsh is the slow land in these colors. I'm hoping, at time of recording, we are a couple of sets away from Reality Fracture, and I'm hoping when Reality Fracture comes out, we get the other half of the slow land cycle reprinted that they began with Secrets of Strixhaven, which means we'll get Shipwreck Marsh reprinted, and hopefully the price on it will go down, and we'll be able to include that in the deck in addition to Drowned Catacomb. Next we have Restless Reef. This is a creature land from Lost Caverns of Ixalan. It's really cool. Comes in tapped, makes both of our colors, and if we pay 2, a blue and a black, until end of turn, it is a land that is still a land, but it's also a 4/4 blue and black shark creature with Death Touch. This is a really cool surprise creature in combat that we can attack with, that we can block with. It's a 4/4 Death Toucher. That's just really cool. And when it attacks, target player mills 4 cards, which means we can target ourselves with it and get even more things into our graveyard. And then we're attacking with a 4/4 Death Toucher that an opponent might trade with to get us off of a land, but probably won't, because no matter what they block with, unless their blocker is, indestructible, it's going to die thanks to Death Touch. Neat. We also have Darkwater Catacombs. This is a filter land. Just like our Signet, it taps for a blue and a black if we pay 1 and tap it. So everything I said about the Signet is true here too. Pretty solid way to fix our mana. We are running 4 fixing lands, sort of the standard ones for this kind of deck. Of course, we're running Command Tower. It is the same text as Arcane Signet, but on a land. So taps for blue or black, comes in untapped, perfect. Path of Ancestry also has that text on a tap land. But it says whenever we use its mana to cast a creature spell that shares a creature type with our commander, we get to scry one. So if we cast Gale with Path of Ancestry mana, obviously Gale is a human wizard, so shares creature types with himself, so it gives us a scry. We also have 4 other humans in this deck, 4 other wizards, and 1 more creature that's a human wizard, besides Gale. So we're sitting on 10 total cards in our deck, including our commander, one of our commanders that is, that we can get a scry off a Path of Ancestry with, and that's a pretty nice upside for a tapped duel. We're running Myriad Landscape. This is a tap land that taps for colorless, or we can pay 2, tap, and sack it to search our library for up to 2 basic land cards that share a land type. So in this deck, 2 basic islands or 2 basic swamps. Then we put those on the battlefield tapped and shuffle. So even though they come in tapped, and the landscape itself comes in tapped, and we've got to pay to sack it in order to go find those basics, this is 1 land drop that's turning into 2 lands in play for us, so it is acceleration, albeit slow acceleration. Similarly, we've got Temple of the False God. It's no one's favorite land, but it is an untapped land that taps for 2 colorless mana. We just can't activate it at all unless we have at least 4 other lands, so 5 lands including itself. So this isn't acceleration early game. And if your opening hand is like Myriad Landscape and Temple of the False God and nothing else in terms of mana sources, you should mulligan that. But a land that taps for 2 mana in the mid game and the late game is still better than a land that taps for 1 in either of those times. It's not good early game, but the game doesn't end in the early game in the kind of power level of decks like this one, or any of the ones I make for this channel. So yeah, I think Temple of the False God is solid. We are running Underground River. This is a pain land. Taps for colorless, or a blue or black if we're willing to let it do a damage to us, because it is Talisman of Dominance again, just on a land. Everything I said about the Talisman is just as true here. We have Choked Estuary as our reveal land. It's a land that taps for blue or black, and as it enters, we can reveal an island or swamp from our hand. If we don't, it comes in tapped. If we do, it comes in untapped. So this is sort of like a worse check land. We have to have the land that is in island or swamp in our hand rather than in play. But we have plenty of cards in this deck, 19 cards like I mentioned, that are either islands or swamps or both. So the possibility of this being an untapped duel is not that low, especially with the amount of card advantage we have in this deck. So Choked Estuary is a very inexpensive way to give us a possibly untapped duel, and otherwise it's a tapped duel, which is totally fine. If you were to want to upgrade this, Gloomlake Verge is very expensive because the Verges are still getting played in Standard, but a strong upgrade for this reveal land. We've got Temple of Deceit as our scry land, comes in tapped. Scries 1 when it does, taps for both of our colors. No more needs to be said about it. Just perennially reprinted cycle of lands that are just good value. I just said that no more needs to be said about it. Anyway, if you want to upgrade this to these Undercity Sewers Surveil land, Undercity Sewers, Surveil lands are powerful and expensive. So that's the trade-off. There you go. And Surveilling, of course, lets us put cards in our graveyard, which this deck likes. We also have Sunken Hollow. This is a Tango land, which is an island and swamp, just like our Bicycle land. It's got both basic types, so it taps for blue or black, and it enters tapped unless we control 2 or more basic lands. Again, we've got 17 basics in this library, so that's a sixth of our deck. So this is not that unlikely to come in as an untapped duel. And if it comes in tapped, that's still a tap land that makes both of our colors, and that's totally fine. It's called a Tango land, of course, because it takes 2 to tango. And if you were to want to upgrade this and keep your Bicycle land, I would again say Watery Grave, the shock land, is a good choice for it. Our last section is we have 9 different utility lands in this deck. We're running Barren Moor and Lonely Sandbar, which are the same card, but they tap for different colors and cycle for different colors. These are both lands that are come in tapped, tap for 1 color, and can cycle for a single mana of that color. Lonely Sandbar is the blue one, Barren Moor is the black one. These are both in here for the same reason as, or even kind of more of a reason, than our Bicycle land, because these cycle for only a single mana. If we need a tapped blue source, or just a blue source, we play the Sandbar, or play it tapped, and we've got our blue source next turn. That's fine. But if it's on an opponent's turn, we can cycle this for just 1 mana, look at the top 2, as long as we have both of our commanders in play, put 1 in our graveyard and 1 in our hand, so we get selection, we get graveyard filling, and it's all for a single mana that was in our land base. The cost of inclusion is crazy low. We've also got Castle Vantress. This is a land that comes in tapped unless we control an island. Doesn't have to be a basic island. It taps for blue, or if we want to pay 2 and double blue and tap it, we can scry 2. Not usually in this deck do we have a need to get this scry off and the mana to do so, but sometimes you get stuck. Sometimes you flash back all your spells in your graveyard, you are hitting a bunch of lands, and you just need a little bit of filtering on the top of your library beyond just what Scion of Halaster is giving you. So Castle Vantress, again, very low cost of inclusion and pretty low cost financially to be able to put in your deck. Plus, it's this beautiful castle from Throne of Eldraine, which is my favorite set. Vantress is just gorgeous. Next up is Demo Field. Demolition Field, I usually put in my decks because the power level of decks I build are usually desired by a pod of people who are not looking for any kind of mana denial at all, especially mass land destruction. And that's fine. That's totally fair. You don't have to want to play a game where your lands are getting blown up just because it's in the game. A lot of lower level pods, or beginner pods, or I'm not saying lower level as a denigration, just pods that are not trying to be super high powered, just don't want that. I'll be honest, I don't want that either. Totally fine. However, if someone's running a Rogue's Passage and making their huge Voltron commander unblockable, then their game plan is empowered by that land, and so that land is a threat. If someone's running a deck that's all about combat, like our deck can win with, and our opponent's running a Glacial Chasm or a Maze of Ith and stopping us from doing damage, then they're preventing our game plan from being executed, and so that land is a threat. And in Magic, threats need answers. So having a single answer in our deck that can deal with non-basics that are problematic, and having it in our land base is pretty unobjectionable, even for pods that don't want to see their mana get denied. Demo Field is my best answer for that. It is an untapped land that taps for colorless, or lets us pay 2, tap, and sack it to destroy a non-basic land that an opponent controls, and that opponent then gets to look for a basic land and put it on the battlefield untapped. And so do we. So we're replacing our demolition field, and they're replacing the land that we blew up, but we've dealt with a threat, and no one has been denied mana unless the land we blew up was making more mana than just 1. So we can do that in kind of a jerkbag way, like if they've got a bounce land or something that's got a wild growth on it. Yes, we can definitely mana deny them that way, and that's not really what this is in this deck for. Of course, you can play it however you want, depending on how your pod plays. But even at pods where that's not happening, if someone's got a problematic non-basic, having an answer to it is appropriate. Demolition Field is usually pretty accepted even at those tables, because that player is not down a mana since they get to replace it with a basic, assuming they had basics left in their library. Next up is Gyre Reach Sanitarium. This is a legendary land that taps for colorless, or we can pay 2 and tap it, and everyone gets to loot. Everyone draws a card and discards a card. This can be good for anyone because looting is good card selection, but it's best for us because we care about cards going to our graveyard. So a little bit of selection for just 3 mana, 2 and tapping this land, essentially 3 mana, is totally fine for us. We've got Mystic Sanctuary. It's another Throne of Eldraine card. It is an island, so we actually have 1 more land for a total of 20 in our deck that has a basic type. Now this is not a basic land, but if we have Mystic Sanctuary in play and we play our Drowned Catacombs, it's going to check, do we have any islands in play? Mystic Sanctuary is one, so that'll come in untapped. Pretty good for us. We can also reveal this for our reveal land, and so forth. So, since it is an island, it inherently taps for blue, and it comes in tapped unless we control 3 or more other islands. It does not say basic islands, but we do have to have 3 or more islands in order to get this in as an untapped land. But when it comes in untapped, we may put a target instant or sorcery card from our graveyard on top of our library. This card seems very simple, and it was banned in multiple formats because it's so strong. In this deck, it may not be as strong as in some other decks, but being able to recur a card from our graveyard without having to flash it back and thereby exiling it thanks to Gale is so good for us and gives us so much utility that, yeah, we're going to be fine with this in our deck. Next up is Nephalia Drownyard. Similar to the Gyre Reach Sanitarium, this is here to be a way to fill up our graveyard. An untapped land taps for colorless, or we can pay 1 blue and a black and tap it, and target player mills 3 cards. If we are targeting ourselves with this, no one's going to mind that we're running this pure mill card, because we're going to tap it for mana when we need that, and when we've got a little extra mana lying around, we put some cards in our graveyard, and that gives us access to more spells to feed to Gale. Next we have Riptide Laboratory. This card is so cool. It's a untapped land that taps for colorless, or if we pay 1 and a blue and tap it, we can bounce a wizard we control to its owner's hand. We have a protection spell for Gale here in our mana base. We just hold up 3 mana, 1 a blue and the lab, if we're able to. We're probably holding that up anyway in order to cast instants and sorceries on our opponent's turns. And if someone tries to get rid of Gale, we can just bounce her to our hand with our laboratory and we're all set. Thanks. Finally, we've got the Terrain Generator, and we're using the Stellar Sight's Edge of Eternity's printing for it because it's the least expensive, but also because it's gorgeous. Look how cool it is. This is an untapped land that taps for colorless, or we can pay 2 and tap it to put a basic land from our hand onto the battlefield tapped. It has to be in our hand already, it has to be basic, and it comes in tapped, and it costs us 3 mana, 2 plus the generator itself. But with all the card advantage we have in our deck, the ability to accelerate out 1 extra basic land that we might have otherwise just been sitting on for a couple of turns can really make the difference for us. Even if we only activate this ability once during during a game, like on turn 4 or something, in order to get ourselves from 4 mana to 5 mana to 6 mana much faster, this can do a lot for us. This can be the difference between it feels like taking a turn off in order to double spell the next turn, but it's actually letting us double spell the next several turns. So this can be really powerful for us. And again, it's an untapped land that makes mana, so the cost of inclusion is super low. That's true of a lot of these cards in our utility section. And that sums it up. Again, I'm releasing new Baldur's Gate Commander decks every Monday until I've done them all. So let me know in the comments which commander or background you're most excited to see. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you want to support what I do here, make sure to like and subscribe. Ring the bell if you want to be notified when my videos go live. Consider becoming a member of this channel on YouTube or joining my Patreon at patreon.com/secondmonitormagic. And remember, most of all, that magic is fun. You should play more Magic.